electronically. And a lot of it doesn't. A lot of it's old school stuff where people know that we don't shred our documents, etc. They just go right in there. They got your social security number, your name, your date of birth, and they just start opening up accounts.
So how widespread is identity theft?
Well, one of the conclusions I came to is that everybody's identity has already been stolen. You just don't know about it yet. If your information is in the public domain, your identity has been stolen. Now, whether or not you're a victim, that's a different question. And the way that I support that, there's been over 500 million documented data breaches since 2005. Well, if you're considering that's just documented, there's way more than that. If you consider the population of the United States is just over 300 million, that means we've all had our identity stolen a couple times. So instead of, you don't want to raise that number, but what you'd like to do is understand, most likely, your identity is stolen because you can't control it. You can't control if the bank has a data breach. You can't control that the DMV has people that are insiders selling this stuff. And all this stuff, all these things are articles written about it where they documented these cases. So if you're part of the identity ecosystem, your identity has already been compromised. So that's how prevalent it is. How many people become victims? There are various statistics out there, but generally speaking, I would say 1 out of 5 people yearly becomes an identity theft victim.
Wow.
Yeah, if you sit down at a table, this is something if you want to try it out. My guess is when you sit down at a table with some friends having a couple of drinks or dinner, identity theft doesn't come up as a topic. It's not the sexiest thing to talk about. But as soon as you bring that out there, if you're at a table of 5 people, I bet you 3 or 4 people have a story about it. It's amazing.
Now, I first heard about it when a girlfriend back in 1993 told me how she'd been a victim of identity theft and how it had taken months to kind of clean up the mess. When did identity theft hit the news?
Really, that was probably one of the first cases where it started to become big. When it hit the news was mid-90s, late 90s. The Identity Theft Assumption and Deterrence Act was in 1998. That was the first act specifically directed towards identity theft. Not to get too into identity theft history, but it's been around a long time. People used to try to steal identities to become Roman citizens, for example. It's been around since the beginning of time, but what happened was with the advent of technology, if you could steal 1 million records and you can make $50 million and your chance of getting caught is relatively minimal, well, that makes more sense than going and holding up some truck going down the freeway in New Jersey as a mobster, and that's why the criminals have become pretty sophisticated, is you look at, if you're a criminal and you're evaluating the landscape, what would I rather do? Go do something that makes me less money, like bank holdups or whatever, and the chances of getting caught are a lot higher, or do something I can commit overseas, most likely I'll never get caught, and I make a lot more money doing it. So it really started to explode at the late 90s is when it really hit the scene.
And what are some things that people can do to reduce their chances of being a victim of identity theft?
Well, there are a few things that we kind of touched on, and again, I put a lot of this stuff in writing, so I'll forward it to you. I listed 7 things here that are best to focus on. And the first part, it's not specific, but it's just to practice, be alert, current, and educated. And then from there, you can kind of, chisel down some other things that you can do specifically. So, for example, shred everything that has any personal identifying information before disposing. If you get something from a credit card company and it's got your personal information, a pre-approved offer of credit, make sure you shred that before you throw it out. As we discussed earlier, you're legally entitled to put a fraud alert on your credit file every 90 days. And what that does, again, is it makes certain that in the credit issuance process that they validate that you are who you say you are. Another thing that's not necessarily prevention, but it'll help your liability, use credit cards instead of debit cards. Consumers don't realize the difference. A lot of cards function both as a credit card and a debit card. There are very different sets of laws depending on how you use that card. And you have a lot lower liability and more protection with a credit card versus a debit card. What's very popular nowadays is what's called phishing with a PH. And what they'll do is you'll have an email from a financial institution that has the look and feel of, say, Bank of America. When you click on it, it's not Bank of America, and that's how they get your information. They do the same thing over the phone. So two pieces of advice I give on that. Never click on any emails from a financial institution, even if you know it's your financial institution, and never provide information over the phone to your financial institution even if you know it's your financial institution, unless you initiated the call. So people ask me, well, then what do I do if my Bank of America calls me up? Hang up the phone, go online, find a number that you can validate it's actually their number, and then you can resolve whatever you need to resolve by calling them back. And then the last thing that I put down here is by staying educated and current. I don't want this, I'm very not into self-promotion, but something I developed as a free resource is theidchannel.com. And if people go there for 5 to 10 minutes a week, just read a few news stories, if there's a blog up there, that really helps in consolidating and aggregating identity theft information. One of the issues with identity theft information is because there's so much misinformation and so much of it, if you go to Google and you type in identity theft as just an average consumer, you're not sure what to read, and in most cases you give up. So that's why I developed the ID channels. I go through, or have my editors go through, the web every day and take a look at all the identity theft news and information, and then we post what we believe is most relevant. So that if somebody wants to look at that for 5 or 10 minutes at the end of the week, that's probably enough to get them updated.
What's the name of the website again?
It's theidchannel.com.
Uh-huh. And and what were the biggest obstacles for you in completing and writing this book you did?
The biggest obstacles is that there is no identity theft playbook, really, and getting correct factual information. There's nothing out there that really, as far as I could tell, and again, that's part of the reason I wrote the book. It's like it was, in a way for us as a society to put a stick in the sand and go, here's our factual foundation. This stuff in here is documented. I think I have over 100 sources in there. It's testimony to Congress by the credit bureaus, summary judgments against LifeLock. Everything's very well documented and factual. So my biggest challenge was getting factual information. And then at that point, reading through it and determining, all right, is this something that's just kind of fun to put in the book, or is this something that's really relevant that can help the reader prevent becoming a victim? And another thing, too, with the book. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was going to say, with the book, what I really try to do is figure out what are easy to implement that the common person can understand. They don't have to become an identity theft nutball to use this. And what's free. Everything in there, most everything in there is free for them to implement. So there are companies and things that you can buy, and I don't necessarily discourage some of those products, but just understand that most of the stuff you can do yourself.
How did you become interested in this topic?
Well, again, the way I became interested as a partner in a bank, I used to deal firsthand with identity theft, the crime, and deal with it on more with the mortgages, and I dealt with the FBI in working on some of these cases. And I saw how this crime, which is kind of senseless from the standpoint that most of it could probably be prevented with just a little bit of attention, with a little bit of proper attention. So seeing that happen was initially what piqued my interest. And then as I dove deeper into it and realized how messed up the landscape was in this industry with just so much misinformation, I decided if nobody else is going to really do it, I might as well do it because I had the skills and the expertise in the background to kind of shine a light on this thing and give people a fighting chance to avoid becoming a victim. So that's how I got into it.
Are there any questions I should ask you that I have not asked you yet?
Well, I think you covered quite a bit in a short time frame there. And I apologize. A lot of times I get so into this because I'm a little bit passionate about it, as you can probably tell.
Oh, that's awesome.
I bounce around a little bit on some of this stuff, but I think that the questions, if people are interested in protecting themselves, and I know I'll probably repeat this a few times, they can do it. The resources are out there. It does take a little bit of time, but it doesn't take that much time once you get past that first layer. And other than that, it's just I do mention this and what I'm going to send over to you, that a lot don't realize that this crime can cause severe emotional distress to many victims. And there was this recent survey that just came out by the Department of Justice that said the percentage of victims of identity theft that suffer severe emotional distress where personal information was fraudulently used is actually greater than that of violent crime. So I guess that's something that I like to bring to people's attention because it's not out there in the public discourse so much. So you see somebody that got beat up and they've got all these injuries, you feel bad for them, and that's a bad crime. Well, people don't realize your identity is stolen, and if it's a more advanced form of identity theft, that can ruin your life for years to come. So it doesn't have those physical scars.